So today, we've got the best of the best. Our good Evansville Mayor, Lloyd Winnecke, a regional thought leader, if I ever met one, and Governor Holcomb. They're going to discuss the challenges and initiatives that we care the most about. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. It is my pleasure to echo Scott Doyle's welcome. Eric Holcomb was recently described this way: Indiana's governor doesn't scream, he doesn't threaten, he doesn't even complain, he just wins. That's a pretty great description, Governor. A veteran of the Navy, Eric Holcomb was elected governor following an unprecedented 106-day campaign and was sworn in on January 9th of 2017. In his first legislative session as governor, he rallied bipartisan support from Indiana lawmakers to expand pre-kindergarten for qualifying Hoosier kids. As an aside, we're pretty rightly proud that 90% of Vanderburgh County qualifying children are in high-quality pre-K in our market. And that is that we lead the state in that space. So we appreciate the program. We're really proud of the work we're doing here. Lots of the partners that are making that happen are in this room. So thank you for making that such an essential entree into the talent pipeline that we're all working so hard on. But I will continue to point out that the governor's focus on high-wage, high-skill certificates has been equally important to the future of this state. Just last year, 320 companies committed to creating 31,000 jobs in Indiana. That is an impressive number, and we should all take some pride in the state that can make that happen. So join me in interrupting his intro to thank for that. I get to edit your intro. The Next Level Jobs initiative is paving the way, and the I-69 corridor is proof of that, as is the commitments that are being made to broadband access. This work is underscored by his commitment to delivering good government for Hoosier taxpayers. Throughout his career in public service, Eric Holcomb has earned the reputation of being a consensus leader. He's a graduate of Pike High School and Hanover College. He's majored in U.S. history, and he's especially focused on Civil War and Reconstruction. As a student of history, he's a collector of presidential signatures, and he currently has documents signed by all of our nation's presidents except one. So if anyone here has George Washington's signature on something, the governor would like to hear from you. He and his wife, Janet, share their home and travels with the renowned miniature schnauzer, Henry the First Dog, and we are very pleased to have you here today, Governor. Got some action on that? We'll talk. Okay, good. Well, Governor, Mayor, we'd love to have you come to the stage and share your conversation with us. I'll let these gentlemen take it away. Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, sir.
Good to be back.
Governor, we just thought we'd have a few friends over for lunch.
Once again.
Give you a little Southwest Indiana welcome.
Yeah.
Hearing Tara talk about, taking office, it seems like it just happened yesterday.
Time flies when you're having fun. We keep the fun in our function.
You have had, I think by all accounts, your administration has been so successful. What, in your mind, what tops your list of accomplishments that you're most proud?
Well, I'll give you an answer. I could give you the highlight reel about where we rank and just how competitive we are and how we've taken it to the next level, whether you're talking about our economic attractiveness or our infrastructure platform or workforce development programs. But honestly, what I'm most proud of is our focus on our agenda, not being distracted, being very disciplined. It's easy in today's world to get pulled in different directions and lose sight of the work that's at hand. So we have, one, been focused, and two, that requires you to hire the best. And very proud of our team. We approach everything like it's a joint exercise. And so there are no more silos. And this has allowed us to truly, to not just be rhetorical about it, but it's truly allowed us to take it to the next level on so many fronts. So I would say focus, implementation, and having the expertise on deck to get the job done.
To your point, when Lieutenant Governor Crouch is in town, she always talks about being your governing partner.
Yeah, full partner, absolutely.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's, her background, her expertise is on full display every day. Not just you know her better than anyone in the state, but honestly, she is so well received in 91 other counties, way outside of her former district or, her local government experience here in Vanderbilt County. And that is a huge asset when the state is partnering with local communities, no matter if it's a small town or a big city like Evansville. She knows where they're coming from, whether it's urban, suburban, or rural. And so, again, that's part of the team. It starts at the top, obviously, and therefore we're able to attract a very well-rounded all-star team. You and the Lieutenant Governor just announced your re-election bid. Seems strange that you're already at that point in your administration, but you had a really fun event at Knightstown. For those from people in the audience who don't know how you did this, it was pretty fun. It was special. We didn't, again, lose focus during the legislative session, so we announced our intention relatively later than many of my predecessors. Because I didn't want to take my eye off the ball. I wanted to make sure that we not just got through the session, but then signed all the bills into law, and we were actually reading every single one of them, that nothing got by us, and there were going to be no surprises down the road. And then my wife and I took a little time, and we squirreled away and went through the pros and cons of, it's interesting when I rewind the tape, and when my predecessor asked me to join him, my wife and I had this discussion about this does not mean that I would ever run for governor. This just means that we're stepping up to help. And then one thing led to another. You mentioned the word unprecedented. When we found ourselves in a different situation. So we didn't want to take, again, anything for granted, and we wanted to make sure we were grounded in the same place and willing to take on another assignment should it come our way. And so we didn't do a typical State House steps announcement. Just isn't our style. We got out to Henry County. There was a little bit of controversy about that. Many people wondered why we went to Henry County. They thought it was about my dog named Henry. It wasn't about the dog. We went there because of the gym that you referenced, and we've all seen the movie Hoosiers 1,000 times. And we were able to, I think the fire code was 870. I know the fire marshal, so we had about 1,200 people there, and they had RSVP'd, and what was special about it was there were people Hoosiers from all 92 counties, which is not just sentimental, but a real showing of how big the team really is and the buy-in, and how special it was for me to look out and see folks that I met when I got out of the Navy in 1997 and moved to Knox County, Indiana, and saw people that I had, known that long, and the same being said about folks in Pulaski County and 90 other counties, and so to be able to be on that stage, to come out of the locker room where Gene Hackman came out, to have a camera follow me up the steps, just like after they got done with their prayer. I said my prayer, I was by myself, and the camera followed me out onto the stage, and I tried to channel a lot of the themes that we take from that movie: teamwork, not cutting corners, not playing by the rules, teamwork, not sitting around watching the paint dry. And then the last thing I said to everybody else was, I love you guys. And that's the last words that Gene Hackman says in the movie. So, of course, that was a real highlight.
You can tell you're a big basketball fan. You've shot hoops and made baskets in all 92 counties. I don't know how many cities. What's the city count up to?
Probably need to do a recount of the cities, but not just, thank you for saying made. A lot of people say I've shot baskets.
Well, we have a lot of requests before your administration, so we're giving
many
benefits of the doubt as possible here.
I'm still adding to the list, by the way, and they are, I will admit, I will confess in front of you and everyone else, they're all set shots. They're not jump shots. I can't jump over a dime, so we do try to add a little flavor to it. And when you've done this in 92 counties, and most counties I've done it in 2 or 3 or 4 different places, so I'm going to have a pretty cool coffee table, book of all these different venues, because they're in barns, on the side of barns, at city parks, during meetings. I'll call people together and say, if you really do want to meet, let's meet on the court. So there's some really unique backdrops, but I'm always adding. So if you've got new ones, and I'm really getting into the trick shots now, just to kind of spice it up.
Well, I'll tell you the question I get a lot, and I'll bet you do too. They ask me if I can dunk, and I'm sure you're closer to being able to do it than I am.
Do they ask you if you can or if you ever could?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I cannot either.
The summer's winding down, which means we're getting ready to start focusing on the next legislative session. If you haven't, I'm sure you're already working on your legislative priorities for the new session. What do you see here in early August as what you'll be focusing on legislatively in a non-budget year?
Well, not to release the agenda prematurely, but we will be teed up to do it once again, probably closer to early part of December, late November, early December. If I were to guess, I'd say December 5th and 6th. Not that we put any thought into this.
Here, let me put that on the Twitter machine here.
But suffice it to say that it will be, again, focused on our not just 5 pillars, but those 3 main categories that I talked about. What are we doing to tweak to make sure that we have a very uber competitive, attractive tax and regulatory climate in the state of Indiana? That means modernizing our tax code over the years. Things change. Sectors require different attention, obviously. And we want to make sure that Indiana is the best place to not to just grow as a person, but to grow as a community and a business. We'll be focused on continuing to build out our infrastructure platform. That's, roads, rail, runways, rivers, and as was mentioned, Tara mentioned, internet access, and including trails, how we connect with one another in communities. That'll be a big part of our continued emphasis. And then making sure, and this is, being the #1 manufacturing state in the country is a huge asset. Success attracts success. And as our ecosystem continues to evolve, we want to make sure that we're #1 in advanced manufacturing 10 years from now. That requires us to bridge that skills gap and the intensity and the speed at which the world is changing around us. We have to be nimble as a state government, as a city government, as a community, as a region, to adapt to those changes as well and make sure that we're getting the resources to the people directly. And so we have to become even more efficient so that we, in terms of our advanced manufacturing, that it's, of course, with our ag calling card and limestone background and timber hardwoods, evolution since the very beginning. In 1816, we're at the dawn of our 3rd century. And so where do we want to be positioned in terms of life sciences and aerospace and, the list just goes on and on and on, defense, as we mature. We want to make sure that #1 ranking in terms of manufacturing is still there 10 years from now. And so much of our agenda will focus and be tethered to those 3 goals.
You talked earlier about being nimble and being able to react. You've been very aggressive in traveling internationally to tell the Indiana story.
Sure.
How is Indiana perceived to those that you're marketing the state to?
Well, I asked them directly, diplomatically, politely, and because I want to know how we can improve as well. So we are, whether it's in India or Asia or Europe, Canada, Mexico, we are perceived as folks who act and folks who do, folks who don't just talk, folks who respond, folks who listen, learn, and then lead. And that shows up in not just our rankings, but in the respect that we're getting from companies all around the world. We're very connected on a personal level to our investors and to the folks that are expanding or relocating business in the state of Indiana. We look at this as a forever commitment, not just a let's cut the ribbon and move on to the next.
Right.
And that makes a huge difference. And so when I'm sitting down talking to a minister of the economy in India, and we're talking about some of the very same issues that we both face, workforce development demands. I had this conversation and I said, we're gonna crack the code in Indiana. And he looked at me and he goes, well, you'll be the first in the world. And I said, well, we're gonna do it, and we were talking about the differences between Indiana and India, and a little different population count, 1.3 billion, 6.6 million. And I said, I know you got 1.3 billion. He goes, 1.3 billion today. Tomorrow it's a lot more.
Wow.
And so I said, well, give us 1 million of your folks, and we'll put them to work in Indiana. Like, we got 108,000 unfilled, high-wage, high-demand jobs that we could fill right now. We want your engineers. We want your accountants. We want to attract people from all over the world to come to this state because of that opportunity to grow. So our reputation is one that Rick Grinnell, Ambassador Grinnell in Germany, asked me the question. He said, who do you think is your biggest competitor? And gubernatorial cohort. And I really wanted to know what he thought. And he said, because your travel is relentless, you stay in touch, we have different waves of people, so we're in constant, not just communication, but on the ground. And he mentioned, I will. I'll give him some props. He mentioned my neighbor to the south, Governor Bevin from Kentucky, said there's two of you that are out all the time, making sure you're first and foremost saying thank you, and then what else can we do to make your experience even more, not just profitable, but more collaborative, and then to go out and look, scout, pioneer, look for new opportunities while we're on the ground as well. And so we're going to keep that up. You'll see we'll make some announcements here in a few weeks about a very aggressive September, October calendar.
Outstanding. Let's talk about infrastructure a little bit. I think everyone in this room has a favorite interstate. I-69. Where does, surely you've heard
Not
about
64?
it. Yeah. Well,
That's fine.
where does Section 6 stand? That's the last big link. And
Yes, it is. It's a 23-mile link. It's about a 1.5 billion link. When you think about this total, set aside the bridge for just a second. I know it's all connected, but Section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's a $3.7 billion commitment. Section 6, 23 miles, Martinsville, Indianapolis, 1.5 billion. So the rest of it, 1.8, right? So you do the math. We're all in. It's actually, the status is we are ahead of schedule. We course corrected on Section 5, got caught up, and then through a pretty creative approach, renegotiated a lease, a toll road lease. We're able to take $600 million cash and move it to Section 6 and accelerate that by 3 years. So when I moved here, worked with Tom Washburn in 1997, we were talking about I-69. And as I was told back then, they said, you think 1997 we were talking about in 1957, right? So long time coming, a lot of talk. Now we're on schedule to have 1 through 6 completed by 2024, not 2027. So I would, in front of everyone, invite you. We've got the Indiana Pacers. I'm going to be in a pace car in 2024. We'll have a lot more than 33 rows leaving from Evansville, Indiana to Indianapolis on cruise control, hopefully by the time I'm finishing out my second term, which is... And then we turn our attention to the bridge, obviously, we're already doing it right now, but then we have to complete that, and then the whole project will be done.
we've really spoken as a unified region about what our vision is for a new Ohio River crossing bridge, that is maintaining the two bridges that exist today, free to local traffic, and then tolling a new bridge. And we'd certainly love for work to begin within 18 months or so of Section 6. How do you see, and we know the EIS will be delivered from the feds in the early 2020. Where do you see the timeline and how it all connects?
That's doable when you play it out. We'll be think about this, we're going to start to let in 6 to 8 weeks, September, October period, that $1.5 billion in contracts for Section 6. So I can see where that year 18 months kind of lines up in terms of getting it done. Obviously, having the public comment period, having gone through that, both in Kentucky and in Indiana, now, before we get that, Rod, the record of decision, we've got to have the engineering, we've got to have the financial analysis completed. How do you pay for this? And so that's where we are right now. We're working with NDOT, KDOT, are working together, stakeholders with you and your cohorts on the other side, to make sure that we get that financial analysis completed and that we know how it's going to be paid for. Again, it's probably about a $1.2 billion commitment. We have a little experience in P3s, obviously. This is more of a P4. This is 2 different states. This is a public 2 states, private partnership. But we've got a successful experience already behind us in Jeffersonville, where there's 2 tolled bridges, where we left 1 open as well. And so this is what crunching the numbers will yield. Now, we may have just saved all that work because Bob Cook handed me the answer to this all about 20 minutes ago on 2 pages, front and back.
We got the email yesterday.
Okay. Well, I'll be on the same page as you here shortly on the drive home. But we'll approach this and let the data drive the ultimate decision.
In the area of...
But we will not be the missing link. We have proved. Now, also having said that, think about, we've got to work hand in glove with Kentucky, obviously, because we're linking 2 bridges together. But they also own 65% of this project, right? Indiana's 35%, and it's going right into an extremely urban area there, too, a different scale and terrain. And so we have to make sure that we're taking each step forward together in unison, harmoniously, and we are.
Your administration has been, I think, visionary, if you will, in including broadband in the area of infrastructure.
Yeah.
You made a big announcement yesterday, big commitment by the state and your administration to make broadband available to areas that don't today have access.
Well, this is a real a strength of Indiana, how you're the model of it actually here, thinking regionally and making sure, as I alluded to earlier, that we're one Indiana, that we're much stronger together when we're in terms of thinking about our urban and suburban and rural partnerships. This is an area where we're a state that's 83% farm and forest still, right? So that's a real target-rich environment. If you're an optimist, that's a target-rich environment. How do we connect those communities in upload and download speeds so that investment is not just reliant on our roads program that's paid for 20 years, $60 billion commitment into the future, obviously. But that internet service, and when you think about the 400,000 plus Hoosiers that live in internet darkness and the potential, what that equates to, up north of about $12 billion, it's been projected, $12 billion of lost economic impact because communities aren't connected. When we start to do that, and we are, so part of that renegotiated toll road lease, the state took $100 million and said, we're going to partner with local telecommunication providers and utility cooperatives, come together, make the business model work. Thank you, Pepper. Shout out to AT&T and Verizon and co-ops all over the state of Indiana, everyone that wants to work together and partner on this, and make sure that Hoosiers have the same access. And you just imagine trying to go a day without connecting to the internet and being able to access telemedicine and all of the way that the educational system is now catered or directed toward those programs that are online, and our workforce development programs, not to mention, again, the economic development loss that we experience. So again, I look at it as a positive thing, and I look at it as we develop in our roads and bridges and our state and local partnerships, this broadband internet access to high-speed, affordable access is paramount if a state like Indiana is going to create separation between us and the competition. And I'm talking about Kentucky, and I'm talking about Illinois, and I'm talking about Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio. This is another area where we are taking the lead, and it will make a huge difference when you're selling Evansville and connected. You may be the hub of the population center, but when companies are coming to talk to you, they can locate 30 minutes outside of Evansville and still be directly connected. That's one key way to do that.
You talk about regional cooperation. I think it's fair to say Southwest Indiana has been cooperating in an economic development sense long before regional cities was thought of. But regional cities was a big shot in the arm to Southwest Indiana. We've been able to leverage that $42 million into another $1 billion of investment. How do you see regional cities going forward? Is there going to be a 2.0, or is there another initiative that will that could provide a similar infusion of cash?
Another 42 million, is that what you're asking
Well,
for?
42
right here at lunch.
Or 62. I mean,
See if I got my checkbook here. CF Old National's good for that, and my checking account.
all the gyms are here. We're good.
German American, or we can all talk. Well, that the regional cities, of course, as you know, came out of a tax amnesty program, 42 million to 3 different regions, 126 million, and not just this region, but your brothers and sisters up in South Bend and Fort Wayne and those regions equally. Fort Wayne's an 11-county region, a huge territory in the northeast quadrant of our state. What you all have done beyond building up your region, and I think this is could be even more important than even what you see from the 8th floor of the Old National Building and the Legacy Room as you look out across. Or I had the luxury of spending the night at the Doubletree on the 5th floor and looking out across Evansville today from the point when I first came to work at the Federal Building in 1997. Much different, not just view, but opportunity. And a lot of that does have to do with regional cooperation. Well, what that's done is it showed the rest of the state that this is the way. And what we have to the future, and what we have done as a state is we have aligned all of our agencies to be, this is a mentality, and it's the culture now. And so all of our agencies, again, this is a joint exercise. And so whether it has to do with our workforce development programs, how are we thinking regionally in terms of our infrastructure commitments? We're thinking regionally, and we're not just driving by or flying over smaller communities. So community crossings started in 2016, but really got going. This next round will be at the $615 million mark. Community crossings is allowing communities, small town cities, to do projects that they never would have got to. They were just projects on the shelf gathering dust. And now it's turned into a $200 million a year program, split in two, because we responded to local communities, said that let's not just have one round, let's have 2 every year. That's $100 million twice a year that's going into communities, and we're thinking regionally about it. So how are our state assets connecting to local assets in the whole region? And that in turn also factors into our Indiana economic development efforts, and how we're trying to entice different investors to different areas of the state. So it all fits together. My short answer is we're doing that, whether it's subtly or bluntly, in the way that we conduct ourselves as a state, every agency, including in areas of health delivery, as Linda White's over here, and how we are making sure that from a regional perspective, there are more recovery centers, treatment centers, housing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Communities ought to know that the state is looking into this not as just a one-off ask, but where does it fit into the whole scheme of a region's destiny?
Well, we certainly, I always make the point when I talk to policymakers and legislators, I explain all the good that regional cities has done for yes, downtown Evansville, but for Oakland City and Poseyville, where they have had key projects in Warwick County that have been completed or underway. So we're grateful for the regional thought, and certainly open to other large chunks of money being made available. Duly noted, he said.
I'll talk to my
Talk to your
bankers,
people.
i.e. taxpayers, about, no, I mean, tax amnesty, Mike did one, Mitch did one, and we'll get to a point to where that could be the potential revenue source down the road. But people just ought to understand that when people in Stockholm or Beijing or you pick it anywhere in the world, they're looking regionally. So they're looking at where the people are or where people can be attracted to start up their business or expand their business, it could be in Illinois, and they're looking at Indiana. They're looking at where people are or where people can be attracted to, and they're looking regionally. And somewhere like Evansville and Booneville are, in the whole scheme of things, neighbors. right? They are neighbors,
Right.
and they are very close. And so even Santa Claus in Evansville or New Harmony in Santa Claus, this is very close. It has to do with access to the infrastructure to get what they do make distributed to their market, and it's global. And so when you look at companies that we're attracting, the demand is there for expansion. It's how do we skill up the workforce that enables them to, by the way, Saturn is up the road, up 41 in Vigo County, went into the Pfizer building, which sat vacant for some years. Pfizer is the biggest pet food company in Europe. Pfizer is expanding, starting their operations in America. This is phase one of their operation if you talk to their CEO. They have plans to ship pet food manufactured in Vigo County, Indiana, to Europe, where they're already the biggest supplier in Europe, right? So the sky's the limit for us. And it's how do we fuel that expansion, and that's through our healthy workforce.
You've touched on workforce several times in our short conversation so far. It was a major focus in the last legislative session. What made it through the legislature that is really offering a positive impact for employers?
Well, you've got a huge, in addition to Wendy, and I don't know all the legislators that are here, but Holly Sullivan was able to shepherd a key part of our agenda through the session in regards to workforce development. And we have, proud to say, we look at our workforce development efforts as start to finish, and that is pre-K through happy retirement and every step along the way. We've kind of taken the approach, and it needs to be a seamless transition from one step to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. We've taken the approach. I say we have a successful experience with P3s. I've come to view this as a P8. Stay with me.
I'm taking notes.
Because and I hope I remember all these. But so just very quickly, we look at our workforce development efforts as addressing Indiana's population, all 6.6 million Hoosiers. So the people, first P, the profile of the individual, whether that's the 1.1 million in our K through 12 system right now, whether it's the 355,000 that don't have a high school diploma or the equivalency of one of the 400,000 that started college and quit, one of the 27,000 that are incarcerated. By the way, our recidivism rate since I've been sworn in, has gone down 4%, much only due to all these workforce development programs that we're attaching people to these high-wage, high-demand opportunities while they're in, so they have more than hope. Before they get out, they're already employed. They're actually interviewing employers on what their next step is going to be. So we look at all 6.6 million, including retirees, including moms that want to get back into the workforce that have been out for 1 year, 3 years, 7 years. That's people. That drives our state policy or what we value. So policy number 2, more CTE, more STEM, more pre-K, that drives those policies then in turn drive individual programs, the JAG program, the Last Mile program, On My Way pre-K. You pick it for whatever category of those people. That in turn requires providers, whether it be FSSA or K through 12, or individual schools or universities. Obviously, Ron here at USI, we've got a world-class network of publics and privates in the state of Indiana, huge asset. Plus our K through 12 system. Plus you've got Bob, the best, Signature is the best school in the country by, from what I read in the Wall Street Journal. So all of those providers, they're focused on the individual professions, how many we need of each category. So in the state of Indiana, we need 6,000 cyber techs right now. We need more nurses. We need more truck drivers. We need more folks in plumbers and carpenters, and it just goes on and on, engineers and teachers and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So then how are those programs meeting that demand? We look at then how are we promoting all of these, not just opportunities, but pathways to prosperity for the people that are seeking it. And so promotion is a big part of it. And then we're going to measure everything we do. So every single program, this was a big part of this last session, is let's do more of what works, less of what doesn't, and reallocate those funds and actually keep score of the placement rates. The last P, my 8, if you kept track of that, the last P is, and I was fortunate, I had 2 good ones, are parents. And so we can't, we can look at this whole workforce development system very bureaucratically, and there's a program for everything. Parents can make all the difference in the world. And if they don't, then in turn that calls into, not just into question, but in need of other programs to fill that void. And so there are, in terms of I mentioned the 27,000 incarcerated, that's a $758 million hit to our budget. So when we draw down that recidivism rate, and many of the folks that are incarcerated have never had a first chance, let alone second. So how are we, through our Department of Child Services, through FSSA, through a long list of programs that directly get in touch, closer to people, give them access, that's going to continue to be a focus of ours as well.
As a society, we continue to spend a lot of time discussing, we spend a lot of money addressing issues relating to mental health, substance abuse. Just last week, Lieutenant Governor Crouch was here, your drug czar was here to help open the Volunteers of America Fresh Start Recovery Program for expectant mothers and women. Where do you see Indiana in its quest to offer more resources for substance abuse and mental health?
Well, we're on the right path. We got a long way to go, as does every other state in the nation. That's not an excuse. That's a directive. We have not just every intention, but we are putting our money where our mouth is, and we are, again, making sure that treatment is closer and quicker, more quickly available to people who are in need, whether it's through 211 open beds, 211, whether it's through treatment centers, whether it's through recovery programs. These are the most vexing or most challenging problems that I think any governor faces, or mayor, or any elected official that's on the ground, is how you can change behavior, and especially when we're talking about these diseases of despair and suicide rates and depression, mental health issues in general. But how are we attaching the pathway for those individuals to not just get to a road to recovery, but stay on the road to recovery? So we are making massive investments, increased investments into programs on both all 3 fronts: prevention and treatment, and of course enforcement. Obviously, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and so we're leaning heavily into doing more to prevent, but out of necessity, we're having to invest a lot more right now into treatment, and you'll continue to see that until we can turn that. Now, we're seeing a lot of indicators that are pointing us in the right direction in terms of volumes, in terms of infant mortality rate. You can move the needle in certain zip codes faster if you flood the zone with resources, and you have a personal attachment in the home early on, preventing things from happening in the first place. And so we're seeing numbers on our infant mortality rate where we're not where we need to be. And I'm hell-bent on making sure that, and we have started to turn that, not in all, you can pick out 13 zip codes around the state of Indiana. If we were able to take it down 1%, all of a sudden we'd be in a much better position. So that requires us to not just spend more money, but spend it wisely and have it make a marked effect, positive marked effect on people's behavior.
In our city, we have multiple groups working in this space. We have one team that's working with Dr. Bill Wooten leading the charge, working to develop a potential long-term substance abuse treatment facility. Linda White's leading a group on a parallel path toward a mental health facility. What are you seeing around the state that cities and regions are doing in this space?
I think this is the key, and congratulations, again, leading the way in this area. This is the key. Where we're seeing the most success are where communities like this, could be Columbus, there's others, who have, and some who remained in denial, who didn't want to talk about the problem, who, associated only with the stigma and how it might adversely affect their pursuits as a region or a community. I remember back in 2005, I had a conversation, this was in north central Indiana, not all the way up to South Bend, so don't think that, but they'll remain anonymous. And I talked to a mayor there, and they said, we don't have a meth problem here. I said, you do? And no, we don't have a meth problem. And it was, just did not want to talk about it. Did not want it to affect their economic development pursuits. And what I have seen as of late are most areas are not just out of that phase, they're dealing with reality, because not only has it affected someone they know, it might have affected someone they love. And so it's really close, cuts across all demographics, and it's caused communities to come together, stakeholders. And so there's regular meetings that maybe you host at City Hall or at the Sheriff's Department, where the judicial system's coming together, the mental health network, hospital association, the associations are all coming together and paving that pathway for folks who want to get better. And I think that's been the differences and why I am optimistic that we're not just headed in the right direction, but we're going to see our way out of this. Now, does this morph? Does it go from, the opioid epidemic back to meth, back to, it morphs. And that requires our law enforcement and our treatment providers, all elected officials to be working together.
Right. I want to end with something a little more, or a little less serious.
Sure.
Important, but not as, and that's what next year holds, and that's the 2020 census. Important for cities, towns, counties, and the state. What's the state doing to make sure there's
Lieutenant Governor's leading the charge,
count?
yeah, but once again, Suzanne Crouch has put more on her plate. The good news is that we're an in-migration state, so we turned that corner a couple years ago. It's interesting. Just before we sat down, I met Mark at BWX, who's from Connecticut, Iowa. Met Jonathan, who's now at the YMCA here, originally from Florida, Michigan. So this was a good trend as I was meeting people, all from Houston, Scott. So a lot of different states all coming to Evansville. This is happening in other parts of the state as well. So we are at in-migration 5248. By the way, Illinois next door is 3268.
Wow.
Right. So no other state is growing at the rate. That's a good thing. Obviously, that means that we're going to be able to hold our own, while others may lose. We're going to continue to grow. So it feeds off itself. So we're going to make sure that the job is done and done accurately.
Governor, it's always a pleasure to have you in Evansville and Southwest Indiana. Thanks for tackling a difficult job with a smile and professionalism and a great heart. And we're certainly grateful for all that you do, not just for Southwest Indiana, but for the entire state. Thank you.
Same can be said for you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.